Real, unscripted talk before starting the video. First, life got busy, so it got hard to return to the channel. Second, recently I realized that one of the YouTubers I see constantly was perhaps copying my memes. I might be wrong, of course, so I'm not pointing fingers, but if it happens again, I will. If you like my content enough to copy it, why not invite me to a stream? Let's be friends. Thanks. The feud between, let's say, Roundface and the acting guy is a good opportunity to see the importance of setting up boundaries, of saying no to try to prevent patterns from going further.
Does it worry anyone else that the squad weapons aren't legal in this country?
Shut up! Shut up!
That's not motivational talk.
Do it!
There's a reason why both negative and positive public reaction to the ideas the media introduces plays a major role moving forward.
I'm a clone of a man named Francois Sanon.
In communication and political sciences, there is a term known as the Overton window. The concept comes from policy analyst Joseph Overton in the mid-90s. He noticed there was a range of policies seen as acceptable for politicians to advocate for. He also observed that there is a way to move ideas into the acceptable spectrum. I'll let Joseph Lehman explain the term. He's the current president of public policy think tank Mackinac Center.
It was devised by a man named Joe Overton in the mid-1990s. And he wanted a way to explain the work of think tanks and why think tank work was so important. Think tanks talk about and develop and research ideas that aren't quite politically possible yet. By talking about those ideas just outside the window, by developing them, explaining them, researching them, you make the case for them, and eventually you make it safe for politicians to support an idea today that would have been unsafe for them to support yesterday.
Meaning, once idea A moves from bad to good, then the same can happen with idea B. So the question is, how do these ideas move forward? Overton was the vice president of Mackinac, a public policy think tank. In 2006, Joshua Trevino, a political commentator and member of the same think tank, explained that the movement happens in 5 steps. The first step is unthinkable. At this stage, the idea is considered completely outside the realm of possibility, morally wrong or even dangerous. But if we get people to talk about it by discussing it in our media, we can move to the next step. For example, let's talk about universal basic income to automate the workforce with AI.
Citizens voted against any interruption in Droid services. They can't live without it.
And why is that?
The citizens are no longer required to work. They can spend their days engaging in recreation, the arts, and participating in our direct democracy.
The next step is radical. The idea starts to be discussed, but it's still seen as extreme or fringe. The window can move by connecting the idea to existing values or political currents, while moderating the language to avoid provocative terms.
What is a woman?
Why do you ask that question?
In other words, let's break social stigmas. For example, let's not say PEDO anymore. Now it's minor attractive person, a term more and more health organizations are defending. Even, why not add them to the many letters movement? The third step is acceptable. Now the idea is part of the mainstream discourse, and people can consider it a legitimate option. The way to move forward is by talking about it in a positive manner through influencers, actors, politicians, and the media. For instance, a few decades ago, the concept of same-sex marriage was considered unthinkable by a large portion of the population. Now it is celebrated. The fourth step is sensible. This is where the idea gets wide support, and it's seen as a reasonable policy choice by a significant portion of the population. Now, to move forward, the media can back up arguments with evidence, facts, or feelings. It must look perfect, even like an urgent necessity. For example, since the 1970s, a large portion of society claims that gender is a social construct. An idea that became pretty strong lately thanks to gender studies. So, men can look like this, women can look like this, and gender studies are teaching these ideas all over the Western universities. So, it's become an urgent necessity to allow kids to transition while they are underage, or to introduce trans women into women's sports. Here's the most recent case. The World Surf League changed the rules to allow trans men into female competitions. There's a surfing legend, Bethany Hamilton, who has a biopic, Soul Surfer, the story of how she returned to surfing after a shark bit her arm off. This unrelentless, unstoppable woman doesn't want to surf anymore as long as trans men compete in the same league.
Today, I want to address the news that the World Surf League has officially made the rule that male-bodied individuals known as transgender athletes can officially compete in the women's division. This concerns me as a professional athlete that has been competing in the World Surf League events for the past 15 plus years, and I feel that I must speak up and stand up for those in position that may feel that they cannot say something about this. I personally won't be competing in or supporting the World Surf League if this rule remains. Thanks.
But you know, this is now an urgent necessity. This is how far the pronoun and gender identity issue has come. Here's a clearer example. We know that not having kids is becoming a bit of a trend in first world countries, so much so that some countries in the world, such as Korea and Japan, may not function as a society anymore in about 50 years because people are not having kids. Don't mind that. Check this CNBC research that came out 2 months ago. It talks about the benefits of going child-free.
More commonly referred to as DIGS. Dual income, no kids.
Oh yeah, dual income, no kids. That's perfect for us. That's absolutely right.
Children are the death of net worth. Pretty crude, but honestly very true.
Its upbeat music, happy couples, and general tone of voice make it seem as the perfect, ideal solution for all young adults. See, it's easy to recognize the sensible ideas. The last step is popular. Finally, the idea became widely accepted. Governments can use it in their speeches and make policies about it. Companies can use it in their marketing and make products around it.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
Notably, new DEI policies, diversity, equity and inclusion are running all over Western government and companies. They ensure that the workforce and the products revolve around creating inclusive environments and messages.
The fact that you are the first female dwarf to ever truly be seen.
Bethesda is part of the inclusion party. Their latest game, Starfield, forces players to pick a pronoun between he, him, she, her, and they, them. 6 months ago, when the game launched, someone said no because he wanted to set a boundary.
Sorry, did you want to get immersed in our world? Yeah, well, guess what? Fucking pronouns! Fucking gender ambiguity! Fucking current day Californian shit! Because that's all we fucking know! Because we're boring!
Was this an isolated cringe rant, or is there something important about saying no? Well, the Overton window can go in reverse. For example, up until the 1980s, black people in the USA were segregated. Now being white is considered a bad thing.
What's the most dangerous animal on the planet?
Sharks.
White people.
Who is your team? Validate has a team of mostly all people of color. We have no white people on our team. I did that because I wanted to create a safe environment. And I know the best way for an environment to be safe is to be around people who are just like me.
In fact, you can't be racist to
white dudes.
I think we all know where this type of trends go, but by saying no, even to a socially popular thing, we can contribute to its reversal. Trends come as far as people allow them to go. 6 months ago, the acting guy responded with a YouTube video making fun of Round Face. In several tweets, he accused Round of being an out-of-control gorilla and wished for someone to shoot him with bear tranquilizer. Hundreds of people riled up on social media to contribute to the roast. Back then, the acting guy used a clip of YouTube channel Diesel Patches to emphasize how pronouns were just a minor part of the conversation and how Round Face was fixing on something insignificant.
You may disagree with it, but at the end of the day, this is a very small detail that remains consistent with the setting of the game's world and doesn't break immersion.
But that's not it. It's part of a larger picture, yet another piece of the Overton puzzle that keeps rewriting and reshaping our culture into something many people don't want. I dare say, into something toxic. accept pronouns here, and the industry will change Wolverine for a deaf amputee Native American descendant later. This is how it works. A finger for your whole arm. And this is the sentiment behind gatekeeping. Even if the rant or the personality behind the rant was over the top. Let's go back to these patches quoted by the acting guy. He said,
The thing we need to look at here is the setting of the game. Starfield is set in the year 2310, so it's definitely not far-fetched that people who go by they-them pronouns exist. This isn't like Elder Scrolls where the setting is medieval times. A they-them setting for that game wouldn't make any sense considering the world is built around a time period where the request for a preferred pronoun wasn't a thing.
Well, given how well received were pronouns in Starfield and how many people flocked to defend it, I can only imagine Elder Scrolls 6 and other medieval fantasy games coming soon having pronouns as well. What are these people going to say then? Wait, I know. They are going to say it's a fantasy game and ask you how is it easier to accept dragons and magic than pronouns. There's always a way to defend a new popular thing. There's always a set of words you can put together to make enough sense to capture the attention of people, corporations and governments that already think like you do. Several months after the rant, various YouTubers, including myself, started talking about, let's say, Sugar Miners Company. Is the name too weird and off-putting? Sorry, but so is the real name. Anyway, Sugar Miners is one of many consultation companies that ensure game studios stay in line with DEI rulebooks. Some of their clients are Warner, Rocksteady, Insomniac, and Xbox. These clients pay for these services because this is how far the Overton window has moved the video game culture. With their sugary help, games come out with the popular ideas and in return they can get low interest loans and networking favors from major investment funds like the Lonely Rock, let's say. These funds distribute their infinite wealth to the good doggies that have positive ESG scores, and they punish the bad ones as well. As clearly stated by the Lonely Rock CEO Harry Pink.
You have to force behaviors, and if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. And that's not recruiting, it is development.
Environment and social government scores notoriously revolve around DEI policies. So studios that work with Sugar Miner Company get a team of writer activists that put their stories and characters in line with ESG rulebooks. Therefore, they raise their social credit score in exchange for diminishing sales, angry fan bases, ugly female characters, demoted or killed white characters, and the usual modern stuff we've grown accustomed to. You would say, well, how does this look in practice? Like this. Here's a clip from my last video about the Justice League Kill the Suicide Squad. With the Sugar Miner influence, this is how they wrote the in-game information about Wonder Woman and the Amazons.
I am prone to wild imaginings. As a man of science, speculation is how my brain finds leisure in the closest thing it knows to play. But there is little amusement to be found in imagining how improved Earth would be if instead of forcing the Amazons into hiding with our cruelty and avarice, we had instead looked to them as a model, replicable if only we could set aside our basic instincts. They've solved so many of our society's ills: broken democracy, lagging technology, toxic masculinity.
Yes, we can.
And thus they flourish through higher learning, mutual aid, and governance without cruelty. They are a golden society who deserve to be as secret as they are. Enter Wonder Woman, so named, I assume, because one wonders why a woman of her caliber and ancestry would leave paradise to play in the mud with us.
Lately, though, people began noticing the existence of these companies, and people began pushing back. For instance, a Steam user created a list that detects all of the games that have Sugar Miner influence, and it's already the biggest game list on the platform.
Find one of these lying around again, I swear to God, I will stop being so polite. Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
Today we're talking about the process by which the video game industry went woke.
And that's why some anonymous people using the games platform Steam decided to figure out exactly who's putting this garbage in games and why.
Our mission is to tell better, more empathetic stories while diversifying and enriching the video game industry. We aim to make games more engaging, more fun, more meaningful, and more inclusive for everyone. I mean, that literally does sound like the definition of a DEI consultancy firm in regards to video games.
Because ESG isn't actually for gamers whatsoever, and it's not actually for representation, diversity, inclusion, whatever you want to call it. ESG is about low interest corporate loans from to fund their video games.
Things moved, and a few days ago, the acting guy said, so I started looking into this sugar miners company stuff, and I cannot fathom why game studios would hire a narrative consultant group. Isn't that what the lead writers are for? Why not just hire a better writing team and keep it in-house? LMAO.
This is some bullshit.
And then, so they consult this firm to basically get a better social credit score with the hopes of getting investors. I think I just swallowed my own vomit. Keep in mind that these were just tweets. He did not make a video about these thoughts. Some YouTubers, including Roundface, took this as a lack of principles. Because the wind blows this way now, a major mainstream YouTuber felt free to talk about it. Before, though, he felt free to mock it, unaware of the importance of setting boundaries. Perhaps he should have done that himself. Perhaps now, after months of trying to reach Roundface through a third party, and even after releasing the private conversation to the public, much to the third party's disarray, we should just take the L, apologize, and move on. Boundaries can exist between people just as much as between ideas. If we don't set a boundary now, the limit of what is accepted in society keeps moving towards dangerous places. Accept pronouns now, and not much time will pass until Batman becomes a 12-year-old drag queen. Accept silly microtransactions now in single-player games like Dragon's Dogma 2, and in a few years we're gonna have to pay real money to go beyond level 10. Many have expressed the same ideas as me, with different words.
This industry is the type you never give an inch to. Never! You accept one thing, and before you know it, you've signed a deal for some of the worst business practices in any market out there. Because in this industry, options quickly become the standard. Behind the scenes, developers are viewing you as a lab rat.
Asmongold, for example, said it like this.
Games adding in these worthless microtransactions to create like false positives so the public starts defending them, and that way it normalizes microtransactions so they can make them more pay to win and more inconvenient in the future, and because people have already been trained to accept them. You see what I'm saying, right?
Here's a similar thought from Endymion TV.
And I think the more we normalize these greedy practices, the worse they'll get. Just look at how woke weirdos will continue their insane ideological pushes if given any breathing room, so too with the corporate greed of the industry as well.
I made a point to showcase how YouTubers were angry about Dragon's Dogma 2 DLCs because corporations use the same methods to make economical practices and ideas socially acceptable. The Overton window. Do nothing, be compliant, and companies like sugar miners will proliferate all over the gaming and entertainment industry, spreading a virus of monotonous ideas going deeper and deeper into the fringe. Where do we set the limit? Is it now, or is it when it's already too late? Because, as we speak, the media is trying to defend the status quo. Kotaku, sugar miners doesn't do what some gamers think it does. PC Gamer, a company called Sugar Miners, has become the target of anti-woke gamers because it offers consultancy work, an industry standard service that's been normal for years. Or take this, an ONG funded by the USA's Homeland Security with the purpose of helping people with mental challenges. Does it sound like they have something to do with the conversation? No, but they branded the situation as the latest targeted harassment campaign within the game industry. Or the Canadian-owned CBC.
Now is the victim of a giant organized harassment campaign, and gaming insiders say this harassment shows just how toxic certain parts of gaming culture still are.
Let's understand that sugar miners is not the root of all video game evil. They did not even influence Starfield. They are just a cog in the machine, but their existence indeed proves that such a machine exists.
Sorry, do you want to get immersed in our world? Yeah, well, guess what?
The first cog is funds like these two you see on the screen. They manage trillions of dollars in ESG investments and are major shareholders of any company you can imagine, including Disney, Apple, Warner, or Blizzard. To get access to these funds, companies and politicians have to follow their ethical rules, surface-level rules. For example, Blizzard can face serious sex harassment allegations and still get the funds. EA can add as many gambling mechanics in their games to get money out of children and still get the funds.
Nothing to see here, please!
You get the idea. The second part of the machine is companies like sugar miners. These evaluate and consolidate the ESG scores of their corporate clients. How do they get business? As sugar miner CEO and founder Tina Bonjour says,
if you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups, and if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, Go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Remember, if a studio does not play the DEI game, their compensation is going to be impacted. Okay. More importantly, the clients of these consultation companies have the ESG investment funds as significant shareholders. For instance, Suicide Squad's studio is Rocksteady. Rocksteady's owner is Warner. And look who's here on the screen as a Warner shareholder. Wow. Now, I reiterate, Sugar Miners is not the only company like this. There are potentially dozens of this. Here's another, politically correct colored gamers. They worked as consultants of Forspoken, so they are partially responsible for...
Did I just do that?
Well, definitely with my assistance.
I did not just do that.
We did.
I just moved shit with my mind.
Perhaps our connection has somehow awoken some abilities.
I just moved shit with my mind.
I just keep hearing I.
I just moved shit with my freaking mind!
This is the worst!
Square Enix enlisted this consultation studio to help them write Frey, the protagonist. As many woke writers do, they resorted to stereotypes. They made Frey a young, fatherless, unemployed black girl in New York who lived with a cat in a shitty apartment and had to rob for a living. The Square Enix subsidiary studio that created the game shut down because it did not make the money back. And so we reached the third cock. These clients, corporations that want to get access to these funds. They trip on themselves to prove how obedient they are. Some of their hilarious practices are adding diversity and inclusion sections on their webpage, like this one on Microsoft, which includes Hola for the Latinx community, No Gracias, or Gleam for the global LGBT and allies employees, Blacks at Microsoft, Asians at Microsoft, and more. Another standard practice is releasing ESG reports at the end of the year, where companies can prove how much they have complied. But it goes beyond words. As we've seen, to properly follow the rules, companies must change their internal structures as well as their general marketing and products.
Representative of representation.
We, the normal people, notice it more in movies, shows, and video games, as it is what we consume on a regular basis. But this stuff is spreading fast. Particularly because companies keep publishing inclusion guides to guide their subsidiaries and partners into the ESG path. And while these practices get companies access to ESG funds, it doesn't always translate to customer funds. Here's where the separation between what most of the establishment considers socially acceptable and what the normal, everyday fellas considers socially acceptable. But here's the trick, ESG funds are massive, as well as the contracts, opportunities, awards, and marketing companies can get through it. So even if companies don't make the money back because they turn their product into a festival of cringe,
there's a tempest in me.
They can still get a lot of money through their progressive overlords. You see, it's all about the money. As for the funds and governments pushing these ideas through policies and the media, it's, as usual, all about power. Power's only purpose is the maintenance and extension of itself, and what better way to do it than to teach people how to think, therefore being able to brand and punish those that think wrongly, particularly if right and wrong are subjective and prone to change with political trends. Here's an example. BBC presenter Jules Hardy recently tweeted what should be done about the type of gamers that criticize the general DEI practices in video games. Can we agree that for round 2 of this, it can be the final purge of these kinds of gamers? It's 2024. I've been arguing about this for decades. Can we have a last full detox of these dudes so we can get back to the positive gaming community we have been creating? Now you get the full picture. All of this is the sentiment behind Video Game is Woke rants like this.
We're so fucking boring! Leave Benny alone!
Even if it's cringe, it goes way beyond the isolated things that make a single video game woke, because there's a whole machine that works by design. Even if you agree with the socially acceptable thing now, you would have to think, how could this trend evolve in a way that affects me later? Because the Overton window never stops moving, and it moves in certain ways by design. However, the reaction of the common people can change its course, as Joseph Lehman explains.
Anything that changes the public's perception of an idea can shift the Overton window. Things like think tanks, the media, entertainment, a crisis, or historical events. Anything that gets the idea out in the open so that it can be discussed and debated has the potential to shift the window.
Boundaries, moral boundaries, give societies strong pillars, shared goals, shared identities, and a clear sense of what is correct and what is not. I'm tired. I am not a machine. Subscribe and like if you enjoyed the video and learned something. Join the conversation and keep the section
civilized.
Pronouns, choose your pronouns. He, she, they, clown, doggies and cats and zoos as well.